Community and human growth. Question: how does human growth take place in a community, and what are the dangers of operating in a randomly collected group? Answer: take certain kinds of organization and the beliefs about them which are commonly held. Then examine another attitude towards them in order to learn something. A certain society is called Freemasons. It is ritualistic, is thought to have secrets, and is named after a vocation. People believe that Masonry grew up because of the comradeship of Masons and their desire to monopolize certain building knowledge and even to regulate the supply of labor. Now look at apprenticeship in Europe, Africa, and Asia, applied in a wide variety of crafts. Again, there are initiation and other ceremonies. There is a certain relationship, including a contract, between the master and pupil. Now recall to your mind the special ritualism and connection contained in the institution of kingship, and the rumors and beliefs of special developments or binding force between members of families, clans, and other collections of people. What these all have in common is the belief that certain extraordinary perceptions can be developed by means of a certain kind of human association, call it the alchemist and his assistants, the carpet-making fraternity, one of 100 others, whether or not the individual entering into the association is at first aware of this extra element. In other words, the verbalized form of teaching, even of introduction to higher or inner learning, is only one possible approach. It is, however, not enough that there should be a collection of people with an aim of working in unison or towards an objective, even though without this, the enterprise is absurd. Aspiration and desire are not enough, and the leadership must understand this as well. The Muller and the Drought. The conception is illustrated in this Nasruddin tale. One day, Mullah Nasruddin saw a schoolmaster leading a group of his pupils towards a mosque. The mullah asked, "What is the purpose of this activity, learned one?" "There is a drought," said the teacher, "and we are hoping that the cries of the innocent will move the heavens." "Cries, innocent or guilty," said Nasruddin, "can have no such effect without knowledge." "How can you prove such a dangerous statement?" spluttered the affronted pedagogue. "Easily," said Nasruddin, "because if supplications were enough, intentions led by apparent necessity, there would not be a schoolteacher left on earth. Children yearn for their abolition. So even if the children's heart cries could have you banished, it would be the prayers of the people of knowledge alone, who understand your function, which will sustain you among us." In addition to the enterprise on hand, there must be a correct selection of the particular team. This selection must be effected by a teacher. But once these conditions are fulfilled, there is no further need of one single word from any of the vocabularies of metaphysics or philosophy, esotericism as we know them. It is for such reasons as these that spiritual teachers have traditionally followed secular jobs or been administrators or skilled in many crafts. They are teaching through a variety of methods. Only their spoken teaching or their gymnastic or prayer teachings, however, are recognized as teaching of a higher kind by external thinkers. As a result, most of what they have been doing is not recorded, or is regarded as extraneous or irrelevant. Just as the random collections of people and tension, anxiety, reward and punishment, and the application of dogmas and fixed techniques produce conditioned people and rigid or mechanical institutions, so, in the organic field of what we call evolutionary philosophy, the community with the right elements, people, time, and place, for example, comes into living being and grows in a special manner undreamt of by the stilted formal thinker and the wild emotionalist alike. The foregoing explains how, if we pause to think for a moment, metaphysical teachers have operated systems which, far from being limited to the simple techniques and doctrines attributed to them, have necessarily consisted of an amazingly comprehensive design. Only parts of this design have the tenacity to remain in ordinary transmission. Like driftwood, they are continually thrown up, or used again and again, long after their real use as parts of their original ship has vanished. It therefore becomes seemingly paradoxical, though only because people approach things from a consistently naive viewpoint, that many of the essential parts of higher knowledge would never be recognized as such by those types who tend to regard themselves as students of metaphysics. A tall, tired tinker, totally tattered, trying to tinker a 10-penny tin tea kettle, is just as likely to be a spiritual teacher as the saint with the halo drawn by some pious but unregenerate individual. He is far more likely to have something worthwhile to communicate, certainly, than the metaphysician who regards him as a tinker alone because he is not familiar with the terminology of this ritual or that. Unless this lesson is learnt in one manner or another, and it has many forms, study and practice alike, formal or otherwise, are bankrupt except for the purpose of keeping people occupied, whatever they may think or may be told that they are doing. It is interesting to note how traditional warnings against random groupings actually work out to be justified when one observes them. Sadi said, in a famous passage, that one dog will pollute a whole pool of rosewater. But as near as we can get to describing what happens in a randomly collected study group is the fact that differing demands of the members from the group prevent its members, individually and collectively, from understanding and concentrating upon important and quite subtle concepts which need much attention and few distractions. Husri, quoted by Hujwiri, says, "The Sufi's existence is devoid of non-existence, and his non-existence lacks existence." Such an idea needs concentration. Even a single individual finds it hard to hold it in the mind, mainly because of himself being so filled with thoughts and ideas. With a group, it is even more difficult. Special harmony. The group must be able to develop a perception of the meaning of the following condition, again from Hujwiri. The condition of mortality of the Sufi should be in abeyance, and his sensations should vanish, and his relationship with anything should cease, so that the secret of his existence may emerge, and his separate parts be unified with his essence, his real self, and that he should persist in being. In practice, let alone in theory, groups of people are not usually interested in arriving at such states, even though they may imagine themselves to be mystics or esotericists. There are many people going around, nowadays they can easily be found, who have tried to live in randomly collected groups and have failed. They then look for other groups, or try to further their spiritual or psychological development in some other way. It is, however, easy to see why they have failed. They have not been prepared to prepare for such an experience. They either felt that they were ready for the experience, or else that membership of such a group would give them what they needed. Such an attitude is quite understandable, and exists in any situation where there is a shortfall of information, however much goodwill there may be. They have perhaps forgotten the second line of the proverb, "Put your dough into the oven when it is hot," after making sure that it is, in fact, dough. The value of question and answer sessions. Question: Can you say something about the special needs of time, place, and people, and the value of question and answer sessions and their limitations? Answer: If you place great reliance upon the technique of group meetings with question and answer periods, you may make progress, but at a certain point it will stop. This is because any teaching which does not use all kinds of procedures, exercises, study tasks, theory and practice, and so on, in due proportion, will inevitably arrive at a point where some people have obtained as much as they can from each procedure and thereafter will go downhill as far as their development is concerned. Neither can this question of due proportion be understood by people, teachers or pupils, who are not on a stabilized higher level of consciousness. There is no intuition, no delegation of authority, no painstaking research, no seniority in years, no other factor which can substitute for the knowledge of what procedure to apply, and with whom, in what manner, unless that special attunement is there. To carry on in defiance of this fact produces social or imitative academic groupings. They can call themselves what they like. They will not progress except socially. The same is true of bodies of people stabilized upon the performance of ritual, commemorative procedures, or stereotyped phraseology, however hallowed by tradition. The existence of so many bodies of teaching in so many cultures and epochs, with so many different outward forms, is a manifestation of original groups which were tailored for the community of that place, that time, that teacher. Of all human activities, the one involving studies beyond ordinary perceptions must, above all, be projected in accordance with time, place, and people. The last includes the direction of the effort, as is well illustrated by this story. If your hands are full. Terribly afraid one dark night, Muller Nasruddin travelled with a sword in one hand and a dagger in the other. He had been told that these were a sure means of protection. On the way he was met by a robber, who took his donkey and saddlebags full of valuable books. The next day, as he was bemoaning his fate in the tea-house, someone asked, "But why did you let him get away with your possessions, Muller? Did you not have the means to deter him?" "If my hands had not been full," said the Muller, "it would have been a different story." The use of the story, of course, is to indicate that people may have a transmitted formula, weapons are a defense, without the ability to understand how to employ it. Like Nasruddin, they go through the motions, merely carrying the instruments. The usual tenacity of replication of mere form, which is to be observed in religious transmission, is evidence of human determination, not of effective content. The ancient Chinese, Babylonian, and Egyptian civilizations, as social examples, for instance, endured for thousands of years, not because they were especially good and true and necessary, but because they were promoted and maintained by determined men and women, and because there was, in addition, a quota of inertia in them which prevented laudable change. They did not develop beyond a certain stage. People appreciate and value form, and therefore do not at first appreciate the reality of Sufis, though they may think they do, mistaking certain outward form for Sufi reality. It is for this reason that the great ancient among the Sufis, Sal, son of Abdullah of Tustar, said, "You may not appreciate Sufism at first, but once you do, you will appreciate it until the end of your days." Weakness of expectation. Form can even include expectation, since people all over the world and of all types tend to prize the experience of expectation and especially the desire for reward. Form implies the acceptance of automatic or conditioned expectations, and Sufis therefore in their teaching circumstances defy this. As Yahya, son of Mars of Balkh, said over 1,000 years ago in this connection, ascetics renounce this world, but Sufis renounce expectations of the next one as well. Ascetics seek the pleasures of paradise, but the Sufi is a stranger even to paradise. His contemporary Sari al-Sakati, who died in 867 of the Christian era, underlines how the attachment to form and to oneself are intertwined, and says, "True wisdom is non-attachment to the self and devotion to truth." And Sufism is traditionally termed truth without form. Talking of the limitations of question and answer sessions, the onus of limiting these to useful content and length is upon the teacher. In his Table Talk, the great master Jalaluddin Rumi said, "The night passed and our talk did not end. What sin was the night's? It was our speech which was too long." And do not forget the occasional enlightenment of what lurks within some supposedly spiritual people, which can slip out in question and answer circumstances. Traditionally, in India, couched in the form of a joke, there is an argument that false gurus can learn to be real ones by suddenly seeing their own inadequacies. This is the story. Guruji, why don't you enroll your boy into the teaching? Because it is against my principles to teach the sons of the rich for nothing. Dedication, service, sincerity. Question: is there any real sincerity behind the feeling of the sincerity that is open to doubt? Answer: one of the most embarrassing pieces of knowledge to have is to know when someone is doing something for his own entertainment, but is convinced that he is doing something for someone else. It makes one feel ashamed for such a person, and it makes me shocked by the cultural defect which has trained this wretched individual to imagine that he is serving someone or something when he is instead obtaining personal gratification. At this time, and probably for some time to come, there is no hope that most of these people can ever be shown what they are doing to themselves and to others. Not least sad is the fact that, while someone is pursuing self-gratification, believing it to be something else, he neither gets any deep gratification, nor does he ever do anything for anyone else, for a cause, for his real self. Instead of looking at this problem, man prefers to preen himself and crow, "Look what I have achieved since I came down out of the trees." Isn't that more sad than still being in the trees? This is a most important technical problem. It can be solved, certainly in the case of some people. But first it must be observed. No culture of today provides any generally applicable theoretical or practical method of drawing attention to it, let alone doing anything about it. And yet it remains one of the major stumbling blocks to human progress. Instead of showing that disguised gratification-seeking is a masquerade, and just as inhibiting as any other make-believe, you can't do anything else while you are engaged in pretense, many human cultures sanctify and employ this flaw. Instead of saying, "You are amusing yourself by engaging in this or that national, cultural, religious, spiritual game," they may say, "This is not a game, it is serious. In fact, it is the way to heaven." For lack of a high enough level of understanding, leaders of thought operate too shallowly. This is because, at some time in the past, a shortage of technicians who know what really is happening caused a majority of the ignorant to take the place of most of the wise. Giving people tasks, or letting them choose them, will often either make them inured to such tasks, or else may cause them to derive sadistic or masochistic pleasure from such activities which entail service, dedication, suffering, and so on, without an additional dimension of insight. The only hope is for there to be someone present to prescribe, from time to time, what a person should do and what he should not do, to strengthen his real efforts, to prevent himself becoming a parrot or machine, or to stop sanctimoniousness getting the upper hand. It is unpopular to say that someone might know better than the individual himself as to the course which he should pursue. Unpopular, yes, but one cannot hope that everything right will always be popular. The people who go raving about that they must sacrifice are the last people who, for their own sake, should be allowed to make sacrifices. But what happens? Every organization known to you is on the lookout for just these people, in order to fuel itself from their sacrifice. Understanding this is what we call seeing oneself and seeing others. One can help by giving you undertakings to involve yourself in, which neither flatter you nor exploit you. But you have to do something towards it too, you know. This something is not becoming an acceptor, rejecter, or being uncertain. It is for you to study this theory and watch it in practice, and keep yourself open to work and study, act and live without forming a part of an unnecessarily oversimplified pattern, which is the way in which the majority of people operate. The Treasure Cave. Question. People say that premature insight beyond ordinary understanding is worse than none, because one cannot use it or be used by it. They also say that someone may lose through greed and yet benefit others. What does all this mean? Can it be put in a more comprehensible form? Answer. Greed is the cause of loss and of the inability to profit from apparent gain. This is as true in metaphysics as in ordinary life. But one's individual greed may benefit others, though this effect does not concern him and does not give him anything. An ancient tale, still current, puts all this into a more memorable form. The Tale of the Villager. There was once a brave villager who had not overcome his attachment to non-essentials. One day he was riding his donkey past a magical cave at the precise moment when it made one of its periodical appearances to humanity. Boldly entering, he found piles of treasure, which he took outside and stuffed into his saddlebags. When the donkey was fully loaded, the man remembered that he had left his stick behind, and he ran back into the cave to retrieve it. But the time for the cave to vanish again had arrived. No sooner was he within than it disappeared, with him inside. The man was never seen again, and his donkey wandered back to the village. After waiting for him to return, the people sold the donkey and its burden, and enriched themselves.